Hello, my name is Cindy Huffman, and I'm a Senior Test Engineer at SAS Institute in Cary, North Carolina. SAS is a private software company that develops software in business intelligence, data management, and advanced analytics. My talk today is about customer journeys, UI acceptance scenarios, and using robot framework to automate them. My team had little to no experience in test automation, yet we were tasked with automating 15 customer journeys in an unspecified time period. Our progress was advertised to executive leadership on a weekly basis, and while our direct line of management was patient with our efforts, there was pressure for us to complete them as soon as possible. In May 2020, the Vice President of the Testing Division asked 3 product teams to provide acceptance scenarios that articulated the user journey the customer had with their product. He had specific requirements about what these product teams should provide. Each team would provide 5 scenarios with features that were deemed most critical to the customer experience. These scenarios would be written using behavior-driven development standards, so they would be easy to read by anyone. And these scenarios would communicate the journey and how the customer interacted with the product, whether through the user interface, an API, or the SDK. These acceptance tests would run outside of our CI/CD pipeline. However, they would run on any environment at each promotion level to validate that each environment was holding up based on the criteria that is important to the customer experience. Before we go into the details, I'd like to go over a few definitions. Some of you may already be aware of these, but it's good to level set for the sake of this presentation. What is a customer journey? A customer journey is used in customer experience to describe how the customer interacts with a product and the experience they have with it. A side note to differentiate between a user journey is used in user experience design to describe how a user interacts with the product and how to design it. What is an acceptance scenario? An acceptance scenario expresses functionality that a product should meet that is deemed critical to the customer experience. It focuses on the most common flows that the user takes through an application. What is BDD? Behavior-driven development is a test-centric software development process that focuses on identifying the expected behavior of a feature. Behavior specifications are typically written in a given, when, then format. Because BDD scenarios are easy to read, write, and comprehend, it is a great collaboration tool to use between teams to communicate behavior that is considered important to test. What is customer lifecycle testing? Customer lifecycle testing is a team that focuses on testing end-to-end customer usage workflows. SAS develops a suite of products that interact with one another. Customers may start by importing data in one area, manipulate it in another, then visualize the data, create models, forecast, data mine, and apply text analytics. Each product has their own set of functional testers who test their own features. Customer lifecycle testing tests how the customer flows through each of those products from end to end. In May 2020, our team began their journey into UI automation and also became a UI automation team. How did we get started? Well, we were presented with 15 scenarios to automate, and we had 7 team members who had little to no experience in UI test automation. Our first task was to find an automation tool. There were 3 contenders: Catalan, Cypress, and Robot Framework. Catalan was a front runner due to it being predominantly used in our organization. However, despite its free option, the potential for future costs made it unappealing especially by executive management. Cypress did not work with our products. It would not load our application, and we found there were other teams who had run into similar issues. We chose Robot Framework due to it being easy to set up and learn. Our VP was also a fan since he had used this in previous roles. We have a few teams in-house that are using Robot, so we have a community that we often reach out to for help. And 2 of my colleagues are also presenting here at RoboCon. So after I installed Robot, I needed to find a way to learn fairly quickly how to start coding in it. And on the website, there is the learning section, and I went to the demos to find something fairly simple to get started with. So under web demo, I found a simple login screen. And under that, there is a Gherkin login robot, which uses the given when then format that I was looking for to help me get started. So I used that as a template for our own applications. So you can see that I modified it a little bit. This is pretty similar, almost identical. And then there's some modifications to adjust for our own purposes. So this was what I did. And once I got it going, I just thought I was a rock star because it was working. And now it's part of our common keywords file, resource file for all of the scenarios that we run. Now about the acceptance scenarios. 3 product teams were asked to provide acceptance scenarios using the given when then format. BDD was unfamiliar for some teams, even for us. We had to get up to speed on best practices and establish our own, not only for ourselves, but to guide the product teams. We use Automation Panda to help us understand what BDD was. It has a great introduction to BDD. It has a lot of examples of given when then using Gherkin, which is a language for Cucumber, another automation tool, but we use that to help us establish our own standards. This section has like steps for building good BDD using this example. It starts with this, and then it gives you an explanation of how to improve it, and it goes to the next thing where you've improved it. So this is a great place to start if you want to learn more about BDD and establish your own standards. That's where we went to, and this is an example of one of the scenarios that was provided to us. This is just an excerpt, but it has a lot of detail, which is great for when we're building our tests. But when you're focusing on the feature that the user is working through, this has too much detail. So when we applied our standards that we established, this is what we end up with, which is a lot more concise and clear, and you can understand exactly what feature we're trying to test for. So some other things that we have in our scenarios, let me move this. So this one is a very simple one. It takes about a little over a minute and a half to run. It's just looking at contents of a tile, an object really in our software. And then we can get really complicated. This one is a lot. There's a lot of user interaction in this. It takes about 14 minutes. It can take a little longer to run, which is about as long as it is manually. So a user going through this could take about around roughly the same amount of time. So as we were building our tests, we ran into a lot of different things that we had to learn. In this particular case, this test had to interact with a graph canvas. There was an object on the graph canvas, and a canvas does not have elements. So the development team for the product had JavaScript to interact with the canvas. So we learned how to use this keyword to interact with the canvas. In another one, we had to download files So we found help on the internet to help us work through that. So this is one of the things we found on Stack Overflow. There's more to it. So this is creating the directory. This is similar to headless and headful. So these are options to work in headless that we had to work with. And then we also have a drag and drop scenario where we had to use some custom keywords that we also had help with on Stack Overflow. So yeah, thank you, Stack Overflow. We would not have been able to do any of this without the help of the Robot Framework community on Stack Overflow. So thank you to everyone who has paved the way. I feel your pain. I'll feel it again in the future when I stumble on yet another automation puzzle. We established several processes to keep us working efficiently. One of the first things we did was set up our Git repo, which was based on how we set up our tests. So each test has a test robot, which is the BDD. Each test has variables, a variable file, custom keywords, a README, and a script. We have these per product, so each section is broken into products. So let me show you what that looks like. So we're back to this one. So this, again, is the BDD file. So every product has a BDD file, and that's all you have in there. We have our variables for each scenario, and then the keywords. So all the keywords is one file. These are the BDD with their custom keywords, and then everything else below it. So then we have the README file, which is basically telling you what the purpose is, the JIRA story associated with it, the Git project, the file structure, any requirements that are necessary, and then the variables that are for that test. And then we have a script file to run this locally. It just has parameters that you can use on the command line all in one script file, and then you just run the script file. So besides writing code, we also have roles assigned to people on the team. There are team leads for each product. We have a BDD writer who reviews the provided BDD and refines it to our standards. There is a person responsible for documenting the standards and processes we agree to. We have technical engineers who set up test containers to run our tests via Jenkins. And we have a Jenkins and Git administrator who maintains the Git repository and approves our merges. We have a report designer that designs our reports and a developer to surface metadata from our test runs to our reports. So this is a high-level process we use when we develop the acceptance scenarios. Each acceptance scenario has its own JIRA story that includes a primary contact from the product team, the BDD writer, and the automation developer. The next step is to review, refine, and approve the submitted BDD. After the BDD is approved, the development begins. Any questions or comments are all done via the JIRA ticket. Code is written following the best practices and standards that we've established. So minor details are taken care of and the developer can focus on coding the functionality. Once automation is complete, a code review is done within the team. This helps us find common themes, ask questions, or find new issues to add to our best practices and standards. Finally, a demo of the scenario is held for the product team for final sign-off. The JIRA ticket is then closed with links to the recorded demo and the Git location of the test. So let's look at one of the completed tests. So this is a simple report, and what it will do is create a report with 2 pages. And this is loading a table, and we use unique names for our tables. which is part of our standards, so we don't clash as we run these tests. This is creating a bar chart and assigning a role. And then the next one is getting another table. And this is a common routine where we obtain tables. It's used throughout a lot of our scenarios. So now once it gets this table, it's going to select all of the variables and add it to the report and just display a table. So each time it did that, it captured a screenshot, which we use for debugging. We don't really compare it to anything. So here we're saving the report, and we have unique names for the reports. And then it's going to close this. It's saved this to a folder for the user called My Folder. And then it's going to close this soon. And then in My Folder, which is the user's folder, you can see the saved report. It's going to open it, verify that the report is there, and then go to page 2 soon. And verify that is there, and then sign out. So what we're working on right now is a triage process for any of our tests that fail. This can range from bugs in the software, in the product, that causes the automation to fail, or development changes in how the UI works, like maybe even a public API change. And so we have a test that is using that public API, so now we have to tweak our test to that. Or our test needs to be updated because something, maybe an environment has changed, and now our test is no longer running successfully, and we need to update it. So we're creating a process that would include auto-generating a JIRA ticket when a failure occurs, and creating a triage schedule with people on call to review the ticket and route it as necessary. We use our own software to report our metrics. Most of the requirements for what is displayed are provided by management. In this, we display total pass and fail numbers for each day for each promotion level in a stacked bar chart. Blue for pass, red for fail, along with the passing rate. You can drill into either stacked bar and see the detail level for tests that pass or fail. One note about the data I'm showing: this is test data from last year. It is not indicative of the state of our product, but the state of our tests. The failures are from when we were writing and testing them. In production, these bars would actually be the same size across the timeline, showing all 15 scenarios running every time. So what's next for us? Well, we are still working on running these in a production environment. We are creating scripts to run these tests in a container and fine-tuning that script to find an order in which they will work well together. Our next set of tests to write are from product management. They have test scripts they use for sign-off for release environments. We're using what we have learned from the past year and working with them to refine their test scripts into customer journeys. This is challenging since some of the scripts are quick tests of functionality and some are just demo scripts with too much functionality. The goal for our team is to continue to focus on the customer journey, since it's the product test teams who are responsible for testing their functionality. If you are interested in doing something similar, here are some suggestions for getting started. First, create the customer journeys. Work with product management, product test leads, or those who are the feature experts to determine what functions they deem most critical to the customer. Then outline a user journey and determine how the customer will use these functions to interact with the product. Use behavior-driven development to communicate the acceptance criteria. Focusing on the feature by using descriptive language makes it easy for both technical and non-technical users to understand. Depending on how many products or features you may support, consider setting a limit to the number of scenarios you'll commit to. Things to factor will be how many people will be writing and supporting the tests and how much time they can invest. What deadlines should be put into place to accomplish the goal? Establishing standards and documenting them helps keep your team organized. Simple items like setting naming conventions may not seem monumental, but not having to worry about those things every time you start to write a test saves time and helps to focus on the functionality. Finally, conduct a retrospective once you've completed the work. Review what went well, what didn't, and document it. Then use what you've learned and prepare for the next round of tests. As I mentioned earlier, other automation tools are used in other parts of my company. However, Robot Framework is making a name for itself. Our sign-off demos have made an impact to development and test managers, and testers want to use our tests. We have published our processes, standards, and tips and tricks to Confluence pages to share with our community. Thank you for watching my presentation today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the accomplishments and experiences my team had over the past year, and I hope you found something useful to take back with you. Please feel free to reach out to me by email or Twitter. Thanks.
Hey, Cindy, welcome to RoboCon.
Hi, how are you?
Great, great. I'm just going to bump up your audio a little. So we got a lot of questions in. The first one is from Ken wants to know, can you share your demo on GitHub?
I can, yes. Does he want what does he want?
Yeah, Ken, just let us know what you want, or hit Cindy up in the RoboCon venue, or just type in, and I'll give her an update. But we'll work it out, Cindy. Let's go to the next question while he figures that out. Do you write your BDD scenarios directly into Robot, or are you using some other tool first?
No, we write them directly into Robot.
Cool. We have a question from Manny, and Manny wants to know, does BDD require a different way of thinking when writing down requirements? I've never used it in practice. It just seems too simple to describe complex scenarios.
That's actually a great question. We're going through that right now with the product management scenarios. So they're very lengthy, and we are breaking them down into several BDDs. So you do have to concentrate on the particular feature that you're trying to build the test for.
So the next one is, in BDD, is it a good practice to use Excel for data sets or to use examples?
I'm not familiar with that, so I'd have to see it to give a better answer.
Absolutely. Tetra wants to know, have you considered to move some of your complex logic into Python, like the drag and drop?
We are not Python people yet, so that's on our to-do list.
Awesome. Tristana wants to know, do you have any specific process to handle bugs that cause your test automation to fail?
Can you repeat that?
Do you have any specific process to handle bugs that may cause your test automation to fail?
So that's our part of our triage process right now. And we have these JIRA tickets that are opening up, and then we work through that. I can give more information in the speaker's corner.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you were saying you were working on automating that process, I think, using Jira. That
Yes,
would be cool.
we just started that this week.
Oh, cool. Awesome. All right. Next question is, What tools are you using for monitoring and generating the reports?
So we have an in-house database that takes all of our metrics through all testing. So it's called continuous quality metrics. It's an in-house database. So we use that to surface our reports.
Perfect. And Manny has another question. It is, when do you automate the BDD scenarios? In the same sprint when they're developed? Are they also tested manually before?
So we do test it manually, and we are not part of the development sprints since we aren't the functional testers. And the customer journeys are already done. So we test those so that they apply to the products on the environments outside of the CI/CD pipeline.
Gotcha. So actually, this Q&A is so short that we're hitting time anyway. So thank you so much for joining. I know you have an echo, so a lot of people probably have a lot of questions to ask you in the RoboCon venue, which is coming up right now. So are you gonna be on the light side or the dark side for people to find you?
Probably the dark side.
All right, nice, awesome. All right, we'll see you there. Thank you again, Cindy. I love this session on BDD and getting started with the team. Really, real world example. I love it. So thank you so much for contributing to RoboCon. Cheers.